Hello, precious friends. Welcome back to Aunt Patty's Kitchen on the Carnivore Hippie. Here we go in round 2 of the apparently cursed cake video. But if I got everything down, I think we'll make it this time. So let's just get right into it so this video doesn't get too long, because apparently my phone doesn't like long videos. So, or my camera doesn't. Anyway, we're going to talk about hardware, obviously. A food processor fitted with the metal blade. A 9 to 10 inch springform pan, ungreased. We'll get into that a little later. A 1.5 quart bowl. I think this is 3/4 quart. 1 quart bowl. Doesn't really matter what size they are. It just matters that they're big enough for what you want to do with them. A medium-sized metal strainer. A sheet pan, a small sheet pan. You can use a big one if you want to, but I find this size very convenient. And a between a 1 and 2 quart saucepan. And back behind there, boop, boop, boop. Right there is a 2 cups, but 2.5 cups or so of warm water, which we won't necessarily need all of. And of course, my ever-present handy-dandy flexible scraper that I am never without. Okay, software. In our pan, we have, believe it or not, 1 pound of 80/20 ground beef. People are going to ask me, can you do this with ground chicken? Can you do it with ground pork? I don't recommend ground chicken. You wouldn't think that ground chicken would, you would think ground chicken would be more neutral, but I find that with the chocolate, I like the ground beef better. I've not tried it with ground pork. Go ahead and try it. If you do, I'd love to hear about it. But the ground beef with the chocolate is the most neutral I've found. So I don't recommend chicken. Also, as I said before, 2 cups of warm, very warm water. 8 eggs, cracked and opened up. 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. This is Hershey's Special Dark, but you can use whatever kind you like. 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons. That's 6 tablespoons of powdered erythritol based sweetener. This is Lakanto. It's a erythritol monk fruit blend, but you can use, again, whatever kind you like. 2 ounces of unsweetened baking chocolate with 1 ounce of butter, unsalted butter. You can use salted if you want to. It really doesn't make that much difference. And we're going to melt those together. 2 tablespoons. Yes, you heard me right, folks. 2 tablespoons of baking powder, not baking soda, baking powder. Okay. Yes, 2 tablespoons is a hell of a lot for 1 cake, but you will need it. This is a very dense cake. And I promise you it won't have any of the weird aftertaste that a cake with too much baking powder can have in it. That's not going to happen here. And we're going to use a teaspoon of what I call low volume artificial sweetener. And it's the liquid drops that you put in your coffee. 1 little squirt is supposed to be the sweetness of a teaspoon of sugar. You'll need this because too much erythritol, I have found, can react with the beef, and it causes odd texture in the cake. So I reduced the amount of erythritol to where I could manage it. And you can use, this is stevia based, pure. I like that. I like it for this recipe because it's really sweet with low volume, but you can use sucralose, you can use monk fruit. Just make sure it's the liquid drop kind. The kind that's powdered with maltodextrin, I don't find that works as well as this. Invest in some of this. 2 teaspoons of vanilla flavoring. A teaspoon of coffee powder. You can leave this out. It makes a really, really rich, dense chocolate flavor. It kind of makes it more grown-up-y chocolate cake rather than little kitty chocolate cake, but this is entirely optional. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You don't want too much salt in this because you don't want it to start tasting like hamburger cake, which it can do if you get too much salt in it. So 1/4 teaspoon is enough. 1/2 teaspoon you could probably get away with. All right, we need to get on it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our hot water and we're going to stir our, well, it's relatively hot. It's not boiling hot, but it's pretty warm. I can put my finger in it relatively comfortably, but it feels hot. And we are going to stir about 2 cups of this water into this ground beef. And we're going to stir it in. We want this, the fat in the ground beef to soften, and we want this to turn into kind of mush. Should have the consistency of cooked oatmeal. In the biz, this is called a slurry. Okay, and if the ground beef is room temperature at the time you do this, so much the better. Okay, you can see that. Oops, I'm totally off the beat. Here we go. See? Kind of oatmeal-y in texture. And you want all of those little ground beef bits to break up. All right, we're going to go back to the stove and we're going to cook this. We're going to bring it to a simmer and we're going to cook it for about 5 minutes because we want this to cook, but we want it to be as broken up as we can. So we're going to stir it every so often. And while that's cooking, we are going to melt our chocolate and butter mixture. We're going to start with 30 seconds. And then we're going to see where it is, and then we're going to do 10 seconds at a time. And in the meantime, our beef slurry is coming up to temp. There we go. Agitate this and make sure it gets all broken up. And meanwhile, this is at 30 seconds. Okay, we're not there yet, so we're going to do 10 seconds more. Don't overheat your chocolate. Really, I mean, it seems like a pain in the butt to have to do 10 seconds at a time. But really, if you burn your chocolate or if you overheat it, you're just going to have to start again. So, okay, this is getting there. Here. I'll show you. See, it's getting loose. It's getting soft on the sides of the bowl, but it's not there yet. And our hamburger is coming up to temperature. When it gets to a simmer, I'm going to turn it down to low. And we're going to let it go for about 5 minutes. Oh, this looks like it might be there. You see this? Not quite. It's almost there. So one more 10-second burst ought to do it. If you find that your chocolate has gone from smooth and glossy and liquid to all of a sudden a hard, chunky, grainy sort of a mass like fudge, you've overheated it. You need to start again. And 3, 2, 1. There we go. And our meat has come to a simmer. There we are. We're going to back that off to low, and we're just going to let it get happy for about 5 minutes. And in the meantime, here we go. This is perfect. There might be a couple of little lumps left, but if it's just a few little bumps, you don't need to keep heating it. The residual heat in the rest of the liquid will generally melt the remaining last little lumps. There we go. That's nice and smooth. That's what we want. Okay, now we're gonna set this aside and let it cool a little bit while we go on. The next thing we need to do, we need to get our bowl, because we have these 3 powders. We have cocoa powder, and we have erythritol. Come out. And we have, come on out there now. There we go. And we have baking powder. Now, all 3 of these powders are notorious for clumping. So we don't want clumps. So we're going to sift these. We're going to just stir this around through our sifter. Make sure you have a big enough bowl, because a couple of times I tried to do this into too small of a bowl and I ended up making a mess on the countertop. That's inconvenient and a waste of ingredients. Now, as I shake this down, I'm going to show you. See that? See all those little BBs? That's what's going to show up in your cake batter if you don't sift. And I'm telling you, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to mix those out if you get them in all your wet cake batter. And I'm telling you, there is very few things. I mean, you could bite into a little BB of erythritol and it wouldn't be so bad, but biting into a little clump of pure baking powder, that's nasty. You don't want to do that. So sift. Doesn't take hardly any time, and you will have a superior product. So we're going to need this strainer again in a minute. So here we go. Here is our lovely sifted powders. Stir them. Okay, now we're going to go back over to our beef. Here we go. And I don't think it's quite been 5 minutes, but that's okay because it looks done. All we want to make sure is that all the beef is done. There's no pink. And this, friends, is what it's going to look like when it's done. It looks like soup. You could eat this as soup. It would be awful plain soup, but you know, it's beef, so how bad could it be? All right. So the reason we're doing this is because we want to get rid of a lot of the moisture in the beef, and we want to moderate the fat content of the beef. Speaking of the beef, the fat content, if you wanted to save some beef tallow from another recipe and use 2 ounces, or rather an ounce of beef tallow to melt with your chocolate rather than butter, you absolutely could do that. And you could make this butter-free. I call this dairy-free, but you could make it completely dairy-free by replacing that butter in the chocolate for lard or tallow. Now you could pour this directly through the strainer, but my strainer is a little small for that, and I really don't feel safe pouring this boiling hot liquid into such a small strainer. So I'm going to scoop enough of it out until I feel safe pouring it. And then I'm going to pour the rest through and get all my nice little crumbles out here because we want all of them All of them are good enough to save. There we go. And plus the fact that I'm a little bit compulsive about scraping out containers. It's my culinary school upbringing. So we're going to press this down and get as much water out of it as we reasonably can. Okay. All right. We're going to set this off to the side, and we are going to spread our meat crumbles out on this small sheet pan. You can put it on a bigger sheet pan if you want to, but I find this sheet pan is absolutely adequate. And we are going to let this cool. As the steam comes off of it, it's going to dry out a little tiny bit more. But this, believe it or not, precious friends, is what's going to substitute for our flour in our cake batter. I know, it's weird, isn't it? But believe me, you will not be disappointed. I'm going to set this aside, and while that is cooling, we're going to talk about this. Do not throw this away, precious friends. This is lovely, wonderful, useful beef broth. It is full of collagen. It is filled with wonderful fat. Let this cool to room temperature, pop it in the refrigerator covered, and then once it's cooled, there will be a lovely disc of tallow right on top, which you can harvest, and underneath will be beautiful beef collagen broth. I have several iterations of this collagen broth in the refrigerator right now because I'm going to show you something wonderful and useful to do with it in a later video. But if all you want to do is just drink this, you will not be sorry, precious friends. This is so wonderful and good for you. I beg of you, do not throw this away. Consume it. You will not be sorry. Okay. I'm going to put that aside because we're not going to put it in the refrigerator while it's still piping hot. That would not be a good thing. Now, friends, this has to cool to room temperature or very close to. And since you don't want to do the culinary equivalent of sitting and watching paint dry, I'm going to pause the video, and I will see you back here in 15 minutes or so my time, and just a second your time. See you in a minute. Here we are back, precious friends, and our ground beef is lovely and cooled to room temperature. And here we are. Here we go. In it goes to our food processor, fitted with the metal blade. I have not tried making this in a blender, although I have seen similar recipes made in, say, like a high-powered blender like a Vitamix. So you could try that. If you do try it, I'd really appreciate you letting me know how it went. I don't have a Vitamix or that kind of a blender. I'll probably, like a Ninja or something, I'll probably have to buy one at some point. But I have done fine so far with my food processor. Make sure it's connected appropriately to the base. And we are going to grind this meat up. We are going to grind it for about 2 minutes. So here we go. There we go, precious friends. Now, when you open this up, this may be pasty and it may be floury. That's kind of halfway in between. It could be crumbly, it can be pasty. So this is a little bit in between, but that's okay. If it does that, when it clumps together, that's fine. We just want the chunks ground up as fine as possible. And now, we're going to add the eggs in, a couple of eggs at a time, and just pulse them in, because if you put all the eggs in at once, it just splashes the egg whites all over the bowl, and then you have to do extra scraping, which I don't care for. So, couple, and then, okay, we got that straightened out. Funniness with the plug, so pulse. Couple of pulses, 2 more eggs, couple of pulses. They don't have to be completely blended in. We're just getting them incorporated gradually so they don't make a humongous mess on the inside of the bowl. Okay, now we are going to add the rest of our ingredients. We're going to add our vanilla, 2 teaspoons. I'm just going to eyeball that. Oh, I need my measuring spoons. And our coffee powder, if you're using it, and our salt. And you can eyeball the vanilla. Do not eyeball this, friends. If you get too much of this in, you can have terrible off flavors. Anything from bitter to sour to fermented to rotten. Really. Half a teaspoon. Or no, it's 1 teaspoon. Excuse me. 2 of these. 1 teaspoon. Measure this, people. 1. And if you don't want the cake to be quite as sweet, just use a little bit less. Use half a teaspoon. Use 3/4 of a teaspoon. Measure the low volume liquid sweetener. Okay. Now, we're going to start adding our powders. We're going to add about 1/3 of it. Pulse. You may see the powder fly up a little bit inside the bowl. If you see that, just give it a second to settle down so you don't get the poof when you open it. All these culinary powders, you do not want to inhale them, precious friends. You can see it puffing up a little bit. And as you pulse it a little more, it settles down. See? No poof. And last, in we go. Last addition. Okay, and we are going to run this once again for 30 seconds or so. Just to make sure we've got everything incorporated. There we go. Now, our handy dandy scraping device. We're going to scrape this down. Make sure everything is in here good, and then we're going to run it again for about 10 seconds. precious friends, look at that. If that looks, that's cake batter. Now you'll see there's a little bit of graininess. I'll show you. There's a little bit of graininess you can see. That is fine. You don't need it any finer than that. If you really wanted to, I suppose you could run it more than that at the beginning. But just scrape down the bottom and make sure you've got everything scraped up. And now we're going to come over to our cake pan. Now, our ungreased springform pan. Why are we using an ungreased springform pan? Well, we're using a springform pan because it's going to be ungreased. And the reason why it's going to be ungreased is because when we get it baked, we're going to be cooling it upside down, much in the same manner as a angel food cake. And that's because cakes without flour are very prone to slumping. And we're going to use gravity to help us prevent the slump. But if we grease the pan, the cake won't cool upside down. It'll just fall right out. But we don't want that. And that's why we're using a springform pan, because we can loosen the sides and we can remove the sides. And then we can separately remove the bottom plate. And we can get the cake out. Now, if you don't have a springform pan and you really want to make this cake, you can use a parchment round in the bottom of the pan. Just don't grease the sides at all. You can use a tiny little dot of batter or a tiny little dot of fat in the very center of the pan to hold the parchment placed still while you're pouring in the batter. Okay. I'm going to try not to be obsessive as I scrape out this bowl. I'm sorry. It's very difficult for me. There we go. Awesome. And we have had our oven preheated to 350 degrees. And we have a rack in the center of the oven. And we are going to move our cake into the center of the center placed rack in the oven. In the center of the rack, which is in the center of the oven, as you can see. And there we have it, precious friends. Now, this is not a quick process. This is not instant gratification. This cake is going to take 40 to 60 minutes to bake. We will begin checking it at 40 minutes. We will poke a toothpick down into the middle of it, and once that toothpick comes out clean, we're going to get it out. This cake is extremely unpleasant when it is overbaked. Please don't overbake your cake. Start checking early. I've never had it take less than 40 minutes to bake, but you know, there's a first time for everything. The warmer the batter is when it goes in, the less time it will take. So if all your ingredients were room temperature when you started, your cake's probably going to bake in 40 minutes. If your batter was kind of cold from cold eggs or cold meat, it's probably going to take longer. But do start checking at 40 minutes. I'm going to set 40 minutes on my timer, and then I'm going to pause the video, and we'll be back when the video, or rather when the timer times down. There we go, precious friends. I will see you in a little bit. For you, just a minute. For me, 40 minutes. I'm going to go put my feet up and have a cup of coffee. I'll see you in a little bit. "40 minutes, precious friends," and I have a feeling, whoops, it's going to be done. I peeked at it a minute ago and it really looked done. So we are going to pull it out and test it. Be quiet. It really does look done. It feels done, but we're going to test it. Look at that, friends. That is a chocolate cake. I don't care what's in it. Well, besides chocolate. Here we go. We're going to test it. We're going to stick our two friendly little toothpick right down in the middle. And we're going to leave it set for just a second, and we are going to pull it right out. And look at that. There is a little tiny microscopic moist crumb on there and no wet batter. This is done, my friends. 40 minutes. I've never seen it take less than 40 minutes. I have seen it take longer than 40 minutes. So we're going to turn this oven off, and we're going to go and we're going to set up our cooling rig. I've got a couple of I need them all the same size. I got a couple of coffee mugs, 3 coffee mugs that are the same height. And I turn them upside down. Here, I'll show you. And we are gonna cool this cake upside down to help prevent slumping. And this is, again, why we did not grease the pan. So we're going to rest the edge of the cake pan on the upturned coffee mugs. As you can see, you can't see the other one back here, but maybe if I lift this up, see the 3 coffee mugs? Okay. Now, this, of course, is going to have to cool for at least an hour. As I'm saying, this is a special occasion thing. It's got to cool completely before we depan it. Okay? And I am going to end the video here. Oh, I wish you could smell it. It smells divine. It smells just like chocolate cake, that's because that's exactly what it is. And I'm going to end the video right here. And here, I'll give you another peek at it. Lovely, beautiful chocolate cake, my friends. There it is. And we are going to come back with video number 2 of depanning and icing or frosting our wonderful cake. And until then, I wish you peace, love, and meat. Bye. Actually, here I am back again because I forgot to tell you something. I was so relieved I got this in under my 47-minute time limit that my stupid camera has decided I have to have. But anyway, those of you who are paying attention may have noticed that I forgot to put the melted chocolate in my cake batter. So I wanted to tell you quickly what I did. I realized shortly after I put it in the oven, before it had had time to get hot, and I yanked it out and I took it out of the pan and I stirred the chocolate into it right quick and repanned it and put it back in the oven and reset the timer. Now, I'm kind of glad this happened because it just goes to show you that anybody can make silly mistakes, and there are a lot of mistakes that are salvageable, and that was one of them. This cake batter is really, really forgiving, and since it hadn't got hot yet, I was able to salvage it. So when you make your cake, don't forget to put the melted chocolate in at the point where you're mixing the batter in the food processor. Okay, again, I love you. Peace, love, and meat. And I'll see you back here when it's time to depan. Peace, love, and meat. Bye.